that we have stepped up the fight against corruption, but not much seems to be done. Steve, let me come to you. Kenya is currently in the midst of one of the worst episodes of corruption in history, from the NYS to the health sector to the agriculture sector. Yet Kenya's parliament has not taken a decisive stand on any of these issues. Again, where does that leave parliament and the public confidence of Kenyans on the same?
Wow, thanks for having me, Michelle. I think it's a very sad affair. I think I've said this before, I don't think there is any member of parliament or any political leader in this country currently in office who can pass the chapter 6 of our constitution on leadership and integrity. All of them fall short of that chapter. And it's because of what we are seeing. Most of them are being involved in scandals. I mean, look at what's happening, like in the case of Ayub, the MP for Lugari. I mean, it's a very, very sad affair. And I think when you employ somebody to be your security or to guard your home, and what they do is they go ahead and steal in the daylight, and you just tolerate them, then it's going to grow worse. And I think what we need to do is actually, as a country, or the government need to actually start cracking whip on these people, They need to be investigated, and the DCI should be given very, very ample support, from all quarters. We need to see the criminal justice system in this country working, together, to make certain that these leaders, are held accountable for the monies they are stealing from the public. I mean, it's like, right now, it's like it is them against the public. It is the political class, the political elites against the public. They are stealing from the public, left, right, and center. I don't think we can
and it's a lot of money. Let me just interject there for a moment. It's a lot of money. I remember in 2016, the then chair of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission there, Philip Kinis, was saying that a third of Kenya's revenue is lost in corruption. But earlier on, you speak about making sure that these people are convicted. Are we talking about perhaps a constitution that has legal loopholes that allow corruption to continue? Let's take a look at Section 62, for example, of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act. It states that a public officer or a state officer charged with corruption or an economic crime shall be suspended at half pay with effect from the date of the charge until the conclusion of the case. The same suspended public officer who is on half pay shall continue to receive the full amount of any allowances. So we're talking about state officers implicated in corruption scandals, but possibly still having taxpayers pay for their allowances. I mean, is this the constitution that will take us to the war against graft?
I don't think the problem is really our constitution. I mean, Kenya's constitution has been lauded as one of the best constitutions in Africa,
right,
and probably one of the best in the world. I think what we have is, we need to go back to the basics. We have our moral fabric is really wanting. It's broken down, and I think some of these leaders, we need to learn to hold them accountable as citizens. I think even citizens themselves, we have ourselves to blame. Every 5 years we are given an opportunity to elect leaders who we feel can represent our needs, and address some of these pressing needs we go through as citizens, But what we do is, because we are so much used to being lured with money, and voting along tribal and ethnic lines, I mean, it's making us to, have leaders who are do not have the capacity to support, to help us meet our needs as citizens of this country. And so for me, I think it's about the morality and values that's broken down in this country. And I think going forward, what we need to see is actually, come 2022, I hope that the citizens of this country are learning, and we hope that they're going to elect leaders who truly have the right values and who can uphold the Chapter 6 of our Constitution.
All right. Let me just bring in Alex for a moment. I mean, it is obvious then that all our efforts to fight corruption will not bear fruit if we do not deal with the enablers of corruption. And not very long ago, National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi himself castigated members of parliament and committees for getting too scozy with scandalous persons of interest. And this has been brought up there by Omingo Magara. There's some of the ways or means in which corruption thrives in the in Parliament and the National Assembly, but there has been a precedent to this. In 1983, former President Daniel Arap Moi had issues holding on to power. There were talks of factions forming, in Parliament. So what he did then is dissolve Parliament, called for a snap general election, a decision that seemed to have worked for him at the time because he was able to create what many would call a user-friendly Parliament that suited his needs at the time. Should we perhaps, as Kenyans, look for the most opportune time to disband the 12th Parliament and have fresh leaders and a new look, really, as we fight corruption?
Thank you for that question. I'm not sure from where I sit whether dissolving Parliament is the solution in this case. I say that because, like I said initially, if you look at the members of Parliament who are allegedly stealing from the public, they're actually being aided to do the same by public servants. So it's a weird combination where it's not possible to steal unless you're using public servants to steal. So that tells you that we have different levels of looking at this. And one is that there are administrative loopholes within the system. For example, every government entity has an audit system within itself. For example, every ministry in this country has an audit department. So that audit department is supposed to safeguard the resources as they are used during that financial year. What the Auditor General gets is usually something that happens after expenditure has happened. So those are administrative things that can be handled at the ministry level or at the departmental level. Having said that, for example, those who are misusing CDF money, they are CDF managers, and ask anyone and they will tell you that CDF managers have become among the very rich people in this country using CDF money. How does that happen? It happens because they are the ones who collude with members of parliament to actually pass fictitious projects, pass projects that do not exist, spend money that was spent on air, and therefore, at the end of the day, members of parliament keep sharing this money. If you think about the systems, the way they work within government, you'll also realize that members of parliament, just like any other Kenyan, are also taking advantage of the fact that and you'll almost realize that either just before elections or during the change of regime is when corruption is highest. And for example, in this case, when President Uhuru will be retiring, if this war is not sustained, at the point when everybody knows that there will be one president exiting and there will be a totally new person coming in, corruption will tend to escalate. And the unfortunate bit is that the people who come into this space to actually steal money from Kenyans are the same people after that who run for political offices. One, to safeguard their interest in terms of the money they have stolen, or they come in at that point in time because they have so much money that they need to spend, and therefore the easiest way is to become an elected member of parliament or an MCA or a senator or a governor, for that matter. And secondly, having said that, I think it's important to also realize that one of the biggest disasters that ever happened to this country is for us to make elections so expensive such that where do you expect a prospective governor to get 200 million shillings plus to run for an election to become governor? It's not possible unless how many Kenyans can make that kind of money in a clean way and run for a campaign and actually succeed at the end of the day. So the way we have structured our electoral system is such that it makes it almost impossible for someone to successfully run for some of these offices, including the presidency, without having looked for money from different ways.
All right.
And
basically what you're saying, Alex, that we've institutionalized corruption so much that it's difficult to get away from it. We'll be continuing that conversation shortly. Governance expert Alex Manyasi, you also have Stephine Ogutu in studio. Has Parliament lost public confidence in the fight against corruption? The conversation continues shortly on The Big Story. Stay with us.
This is KTN News.
Betting is the fastest growing biashara in Kenya. If you want to invest in a good biashara, open a betting shop today. Because many betting customers go to betting shops to chase a virtual game, sports betting, live betting, and more. Open betting shop yako wherever you are and celebrate the growth of your biashara.
Karibu Betin.
Grow nasi.
Tukiwa magavana tumesema pia referendum watuogopi, lakini tunataka referendum ambaye itahakikisha kwamba pesa imekuja kwa mwananchi mashinani na itakuja kwa mwananchi mashinani kufanyia mwananchi kazi.
KTN Prime Highlights in association with KCB Bank.
Excitement as history is made after the first inaugural KQ flight touches down at the JF Kennedy International Airport in New York. Ugali meal to be expensive as the price of a 2-kilogram packet of unga set to increase by 25 shillings. Former Public Service Principal Secretary Lillian Omolo and 36 others charged afresh over the second NYS scandal.
We are dealing with students whose schools were demolished. We're also dealing with students whose schools were affected by the rain, right? And we're going to make sure that all of them sit their exams in alternative exam centers.
And over 1 million candidates to sit for their KCPE exams starting tomorrow.
Parenting, schooling, building, investing, saving, or maybe retiring.
Achieve your dreams with the KCB Gold Savings Account. Enjoy Kenya's highest earning interest rate by visiting any KCB branch today and opening a KCB Gold Savings Account. KCB Bank. Go ahead.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back to The Big Story. On this short night, we speak to governance experts Alex Manyasi and Stephine Ogutu on public confidence and Parliament. We are discussing the war against corruption. Steve, I'd like to begin with you once again. The bribery and corruption fiascos that have engulfed the 12th Parliament are a national shame, no doubt. But what resolute action can be done to redeem the image of both the institution and the country in matters of corruption?
I think these leaders have become a billboard of corruption, and it's not a good thing. And for me, I think there is one thing that the president had mentioned a few months ago about the lifestyle audit. I think for me that was a very noble idea to address corruption in this country, especially looking at those high-profile leaders we have in this country, including members of parliament. And I don't know where it disappeared to, but I'm hoping that that can be revived and we can have some of these leaders taken through this rigorous lifestyle audit exercise. So we can know really who are these leaders who are stealing from the public, because we are really losing a lot as a country. I was reading a report the other day, I think yesterday, by the Auditor General, on money that has been lost just from the western, the counties in the western part of Kenya, close to 6.5 billion. 6.2 billion, and that is a lot of money. That is just the western part of Kenya. What about the other parts of the country? And that is just at the county level. And so I think the country is hurting, and the president must be supported in his efforts toward addressing corruption. The EACC must step up its game, and they must work very closely with the DPP and the DCI office. And like I'd mentioned before, the entire criminal justice system must work together and speak the same language, so that these guys can be brought to justice. What they're doing is actually killing this country.
Right.
Because what happens when you steal money, say, from NYS that is supposed to create employment for the youth of this country? I mean, you're making a lot of young people go jobless, and they get into crime, and they're shot dead. And so a generation is just fading away like that, and that is not a good thing. So I hope that this can be addressed in a very sober way. Again, if the president really wants to achieve his Big Four agenda, then for me, I think, and this has been said by many other Kenyans, the best way to achieve the Big Four agenda is actually by tackling corruption. Because, say, for example, the Big Four agenda, the housing agenda alone, the budget allocation for it is about 600 billion every year, and that is the amount of money we lose to corruption every year. So imagine what that kind of money can do if those loopholes are sealed and leaders conduct their duties with a lot of integrity and that kind of thing.
All right, that's one way. Steve, let's hear from you, because earlier on, you mentioned public servants are the same people aiding the corruption by senior, government officials as well as members of parliament. So far, about 500 of more than 1,000 procurement and accounting officers have been cleared to go back to work after being subjected to vetting. It is a vetting process that began after the revival on the war against corruption. Is this a process you would be confident that would change the scape of corruption in the country?
It's a good step, but it's just a very small bit of those many steps that are supposed to be taken to address corruption. Like I've mentioned, that was targeting specifically the guys in the procurement departments in the public institutions. And a lot of corruption is happening actually in the MP offices, in the governors, in the counties, the governors' offices, coffers, and all that. So I think there's need to have a multi-stakeholder approach to address this menace. Not just there's no single solution to this menace. We need to have a multi-approach toward addressing corruption.
All right. Alex, let me hear from you. Earlier on, you were mentioning our rating in terms of corruption. Number 143, I believe, was the last number, when TI made that index. What lessons can Kenya learn from countries that have been ranked better than, like Denmark, for example?
I guess we have realized that we're actually doing very badly. Like I said, for us to be ranking only slightly ahead of countries that you can consider failed states is actually in itself a sorry state, so to speak. For the countries that have actually succeeded, they have made corruption extremely painful. That's number one. Secondly, they have made sure that the justice system is actually efficient, it's effective, justice is delivered as quickly as possible, because one of the things that keeps happening in this country is that someone is taken to court, they're out on bail, and then it takes another 7 years. So before even justice is served, it no longer makes sense. So the justice system must be relooked into. Secondly, fortunately, the EACC, the CEO is exiting. We need to take this opportunity to actually clean up the anti-corruption agency, because those are the people who, when corruption happens, for instance, and they take files and they do investigations, and they deliberately, for instance, tamper with the evidence that is required, and then those files are taken to court through the DPP, and then those cases are lost, then it makes nonsense out of the whole process. So people have known how to buy themselves out of those processes by using the officials, and that's why I say that it's not possible to do any corruption in this country unless public servants are involved, because they're the ones who will do investigations, they're the ones who will handle those files, they're the ones who will make sure that they determine actually who ends up in court and whether that case is won or not. But largely, I think as the ultimate goal, one of the big four agenda items is actually manufacturing. In a country like Kenya, the biggest business doer, if I can use that word, is actually the government, because that is where the biggest spending is. The private sector is almost non-existent. So for those people who want to make big money, for example, if you want to make money, like I said, to become a governor in this country, and you want to make 200 million shillings to run, you can only do that if you're doing business with government. So you can't do that kind of business with the private sector and expect to make that kind of money. So we need to grow the economy so that we shift focus from people planning how to loot government to people actually doing genuine business out there and making genuine money. Because we have business people in this country who can actually successfully do business and succeed, but the economy has to grow. When we see figures like, for example, almost 65 or 60% of Nairobians, for instance, staying in the informal settlements, I would say that the reason why those people stay in the slums is because of what I call the push factors. What are the things that push them to live in the informal settlements? It's because they're earning 10,000 shillings in a month, they cannot sustain themselves, and that is the only place where they can live and walk to work and earn a living. So unless we grow the economy, we will still have scenarios where a politician or someone will have to make big money, pay these people during campaign time, if you can say so, literally, like distribute money so that they get to be elected, because we are dealing with an electorate that is poor. So when you have Kenyans who are suffering out there, the slightest opportunity they get, when a politician shows up or during campaign period, people actually line up to be given money. People line up to be given sugar. People line up to be given unga. So we are dealing with a country where, unless we sort out our economy, we largely need to rethink the way our country runs if we are to fight corruption and actually win it.
All right. Many thanks. That is Alex Munyasi there. Steve, your final comment very, very briefly. President Uhuru Kenyatta has been very categorical about what would befall state officers implicated in corruption. Still, that doesn't seem to have made corruption painful enough for them to engage in. What does that say about the executive and the legislature in terms of the war against corruption?
Well, I hope I didn't get you quite clear, but what I would like to say is I think what we need to see the president doing, or the executive doing, is actually the president must continue effecting what he started about the lifestyle audit. I think for me that is one of the long-lasting solutions to corruption in this country. Every public servant must be subjected to this kind of